Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Back from the pond, across the pond. Good morning to everybody who is with us. See, some of y'all are jumping online. Yeah, it's happy pre-Halloween, I guess. I thought today was Halloween, so I was all ready to go trick-or-treating with the kids, but I have a little bit of jet lag, so that's gonna happen. Got a few things to talk about. So I cut myself shaving, if you wonder what's going on there. I have a little beauty mark. This is why Cindy Crawford doesn't shave. So yeah, there you go. So hey, I'm in a book, and it's gonna be really strange. You're gonna feel like, what Jay's in a book? Jay wrote a little part of a book. I did, and you won't believe what I wrote in a book either. You'll be even more surprised. I wrote a prayer in a prayer book. So how about that? And so I got Reverend Robert Lee contacted me about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago it was, because I was in Belfast. We were negotiating the documentary, getting the documentary sold, and Reverend Lee, called me and asked if I would write a prayer for the prayer book. And I said, well, now I'm feeling a lot of doubt and not feeling really prayerful. And he's like, well, it's a prayer book for foster and adopted families. And he's like, I just feel like, I know that's not your experience, but you've had a lot of family experience, and I think you should give it a shot. And we went back and forth. And, finally I just sat down and said, well, right now, what I feel like, sometimes when, your father isn't present, and God has this father idea, and you don't know if God's there, and what would that prayer look like? And so, I wrote it down and sent it to him and said, no pressure. I said, I know this is kind of the doubter's prayer, but I ended up getting in Robert's book. So here's the copy of the book. I just got it. I'm not sure if it's out yet. But yeah, there's a little write-up on the back there. I mentioned somewhere inside here, but yeah, so this is part of the prayer book. A lot of different ministers and pastors and people and just folks living life wrote for this, and so there you go. Yeah, so if you get a chance and you're looking for a prayer book, or somebody that this might be suit, there you go. I also had a really close friend of mine who is adopted, and I thought, this would be something great to kind of, dedicate to them. So yeah, that's cool. What else happened this week? Let's see. So I went to London, and I got to see the Tammy Faye musical. And I think today is going to be a little bit of like, is this a review or a talk or a sermon? What is this today that we're doing? And you'll have to figure it out yourself, to be honest with you. Just a cool few things, like I like to mention. I was really grateful for Karen, my ex-wife, to take the kids for me so I could fly out to London. Really grateful to the the Tammy Faye group, Elton John, Jake, Joseph, James, so many names. The folks who made it possible for me to pay for my flight and let me see the play, and It was on press night, the opening night, so that was really cool to be a part of that. But put me in a hotel. I had time to explore. I got lost so many times in London. I lived in New York, and I had no idea like London was so big. I got so lost trying to find Johnny Rotten's old flat. But I did find some cool things. I got to see Kate. Finally, we got to meet in person, and I got to see my friend Barry. You may know as UK bloke, and that was just awesome. And then my friend Maria had an extra ticket. Her and her husband had an extra ticket to go see, and Barry was there too, to go see Nick Cave speak about his last book. So I got to go do that at the last day. As I got to go see Nick Cave speak, and it was really incredible because he talked a lot about like how we judge others and how we judge people in the limelight and things like that. And and it was just great. It was what was needed to end the trip. So it was just a nice moment to have that and listen to Nick Cave, because here's a guy who's lost 2 children, been through a lot of hell, and speaks very honestly and very candidly. And I was really grateful to be a part of that. He was interviewed by the guy he wrote the book with, and it was just really incredible. So thank you, Maria, for that ticket. And I got to meet Jake, who wrote the lyrics to the music, and his mother was there. And his mom was awesome. She, like, as we went into the theater, she just put her arm around mine and was just very motherly, and knew I was nervous. And then she was really excited to meet me because she was a fan of my family growing up and things like that. And so that, it was just, it worked out well. I was happy about that. Everybody was really kind, and I felt like I made new friends, and that's not usual for me, to be honest with you, because I'm very introverted, as most of you know. Anyhow, so what I wanted to do as I was preparing the talk is I was like, I want to tell everybody about the play, and I kind of saw some parallels of things that we talk about anyway in the play. And so I'm just going to go through it. Like, I just want to just blurt out everything I got from it, but then that would ruin the talk. So I'll try to give you the talk, and maybe we'll jump this shark. I'll try not to give too many spoilers in case you're out there going to see it, or in case it makes its way out here to the States. But the Tammy Faye musical. So, life has been very strange for me in that way, of where you grow up in crisis. You go through a crisis. You spend I spent the first 11 years of my life on television. Then the next few years through scandal and prison and rag magazines and tell-all books and things like that. I wrote my own book. Then there was The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which was an amazing documentary done by World of Wonder that came out, and then because 20 years later they make a major motion picture that wins an Oscar for Best Actress for Jessica Chastain. And so you're reliving like these people's interpretations of your life, and really a part of my life that was really tough to go through, was really hard to navigate. And so it's interesting to have that, to have your trauma retold in so many different ways and how people see it. So the musical, because musicals are done differently, because it's not like, oh, we've got to be, and here I am working on a documentary where we're like going through every fact. I mean, I just went through my father's whole, like 3 appeal books, like going through them with fine-tooth comb and all this stuff, and, talking to people who were there, talking to people who worked with Jerry Falwell, we're doing a lot of stuff. And then you kind of come into this, like, this whole different type of process of art, of life, of art imitating life, if you will. And so for me, like, it was watching my life through a kaleidoscope, you know? So it was like, you know, you had a kaleidoscope and everything was kind of like blending together and mixed together, but it was very beautiful. And the music was great. Steve, our Steve, was part of the cast. Well, he's not in the, I mean, not him himself, but someone plays Steve. And that was just fantastic. I'll probably talk a little bit about that as I go through. So that was just really interesting, you know, someone playing my mom, someone playing my dad. Actually, the guy playing my dad, his name's Andrew. I got to see him years and years and years ago. I got invited to a sneak like preview that was not even like, it was like in a warehouse or something, of the Book of Mormon, and he was playing the main character in the Book of Mormon. And so that was really cool. But it really was a celebration of my mother's life, you know, the ups and downs of her life, and the joys of living and the life of suffering. So that was extremely interesting. And here, it's funny because I was writing out my talk today here. I wrote, like, there's three things that stood out to me, and there's way more than three things that stood out to me, but there are three, I think, main kind of concepts that really stuck with me. And I'm going to see how this affects us as a community, how it affects us as people who are followers of thinking differently, of arguing well, of trying to live life well. It's really Halloweeny outside right now. It's like the wind is like, woo, you know, it's pretty crazy. And I left the window open, so I've got this fly that I can't get, but we'll get him. We're gonna get that fly. But there's a few things that stood out to me. One is, funny thing is, I was sitting next to a critic for The Guardian. And so he's doing his best to show no emotion because he's got to write this review for the paper the next day. And so he's sitting next to me, and I go, "Oh, are you a critic?" Because he keeps writing in the dark, which was amazing. And he goes, "Yes, I am. Please don't ask me my opinion." And I'm like, "Okay, settle down, Tiger." And he goes, "Oh, you're their child. I'm like, "I am. I am the son of Jim and Tammy." And he goes, "It must be very strange for you to see this." And I said, "Yeah, it's very unique." I said, "I've seen a lot of different interpretations, TV movies, actual film, documentary, working on a documentary right now. So yeah, I've seen a lot of, there's been a lot of interest." And I said, "Yeah, it's definitely strange." And so here it was just me and him. I had some of the producers behind me, and that was nice because every now and then I get a little pat on the shoulder. Just being there, and this is what I really appreciated about the cast and the staff and the writers and the producers reaching out to me, was just being there felt like it was being part of my mom's life again, you know, really continuing to share in her legacy, which I feel like I carry her legacy with me everywhere I go. But this really felt like being a part of her legacy. And a part of her life, you know. It's people kind of, you know, seeing people celebrate her life, ups and the downs. It's still like, you know, you're able to kind of have that part that you've lost, you know. It's kind of like reliving that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You know, but I do want to say again, like, I can't thank Elton and Jake and Joseph and James and everyone else who made this possible, because it was really, in a way, it was a very healing thing. You know, it's not perfect. You know, when you've lived it and you see people interpret things, you go, but it was a musical, so you kind of keep that in mind, like how this story works, in effect and time, and how these things, these work. But my mother's spirit and my mother's transparency was caught by the main actress. It was really just, she really blew me away. She had an amazing voice. And she wasn't doing an impersonation. It was not like, you know, like there wasn't heavy makeup or anything like that. It was it was like an impersonation. It wasn't impersonation. I mean, it was like, she was capturing the spirit of my mother's love, my mother's will to live, my mother's will to go through hard times. My mother was someone, and what I realized in this is someone who never knew how to give up. And she was one who never knew how to give up and never gave up, and really, even at times where I think most of us would have given up, she continued to endure, to really endure. And I'm going to jump ahead because I'm going to jump past the first act. I'm not going to give you any details, or I'm trying to stay kind of like as detail free as possible. But there's a few details I really wanted to give, so that's why I'm kind of trying to skim, because I thought they were important to share with you and important to make a point that really ends up leading us back to really what we usually discuss here at Revolution. There was a scene that takes place after the scandal, and they have this song, and it's called "Bring Us the Face of Tammy Faye." And Jake, who wrote the song, we were talking about this. He's the singer from really one of the guys behind Scissor Sisters. Told me he wrote this because it was kind of inspired by the faith. People had those T-shirts that I ran into Tammy Faye at the mall, and people made fun of her makeup and all these things. And so it was called "Bring Me the Face of Tammy Faye." And it was showing all the people turning on her, people making fun of her, the singers, as they would interject, someone would say, "Oh, take off those eyelashes. Look at her. She just, are those tears real?" And all this kind of, all the ridicule that was there. It was sad, yet it was very validating of what she and my family suffered to have that validation brought, because, when you get 30 years away from something and you still feel the pain, but, most people are like, "All right, buddy, it's time to move on," And what I feel for myself personally is like this play, I think the work on this doc we're doing with Vice has really allowed me to get to a point where I'm ready to kind of just do my own thing and move on a bit. I mean, my mother's always going to be a huge inspiration in my life, and my father as well. But it was, I think, along with having psychoanalysis and seeing this, it was just one of those things. It was a validation that sometimes you need. Sometimes you go like, why do I hurt so much? Why do I feel so much pain? Why am I so sensitive to how people of a particular faith act, or how people in a particular, how the media reacts to other people when people suffer, or are accused, or when people are humiliated in the news? I'm usually thinking about the person being humiliated rather than dumping humiliation on top of them. Worried about the person's mental health as they're saying things that don't seem to make sense. And I'm going, what's going on here? And one of the neat things about seeing Nick Cave is saying, we often sum up people by their worst, when their worst of their personality is exposed. Sometimes we freeze people at that time. And he goes, that's not what I do. He's like, we all have parts of the personality we don't want out there or seen. And when you're an artist and when you're in the media, sometimes that thing that's what happens, is it gets out there and it's there, and it's people don't wait till the end of the show. They stay there. And I found that to be really beautiful. Because I really want to be someone who I really do believe in grace, and I want to be a grace giver, and I want to push grace as much as I can. You know what I mean? I want people to say, "Oh, too much grace." That's what they used to say to me when I was, going to all these evangelical events and things. "Well, are you maybe a little too much grace, too much grace?" Like, that's what I want. Too much grace, mega grace, pushing grace, living a life of grace, living a life of you are accepted, embodying Christ's words and Paul's words and Tillich's words and even some of Hegel's words about what this grace, what this unconditional thing really means. And it's not this unconditional thing that has conditions to get the unconditional thing. It's the living in that you are accepted by that which is greater than yourself. and it really focused on this, what that moment was really focusing on the suffering that she was going through, and my father and other televangelists as they were going through these things, and a lot of them by making, some of them made poor decisions, some of them, seemed to, at the time, you would have said these people deserve what they're getting. But it was something that was a validation of, there was suffering here. There was too much. It was too much ridicule, too much judgment. And I was thinking how these days it seems that folks really struggle to see the suffering of others. I feel like it's off. I missed, someone said something, asked a question, and I missed it. I'm sorry. The questions just come up here so quickly. So I don't know what I know it was about my mother, and then it just faded away. So I'll try to keep my eye open to see if another question comes up. Sometimes you just talk to each other, so sometimes I just kind of don't look, which is fine, because heck, man, that's why I want this to be the most comfortable place you can, and help each other out. But I was going to say is, these days it seems like folks really struggle to see the suffering of others. Often we're very focused on our own suffering, or who the person is we think is causing the suffering. We're not often, looking at individuals suffering. Sometimes it's easy to be distracted, especially by the media and social media, and all the hype that comes up. But what was great is it really showed my mom's spirit, is that how she stood she stood strong and refused to give up on herself, which I struggle with. I actually have given up on myself before, and thank goodness I was unsuccessful at that. But she refused to give up, not on just only herself, but refused to give up on others and loving others. And so for me, that is like a huge, that's one of the things that drives me. I was telling somebody recently, I said, I've been feeling my faith again, which is something that I really have been struggling with over the past couple of years. And I said, I've really been feeling it. And it's funny because it's really be coming through things like studying philosophy, but also remembering who my mother was and what she gave to me as I've worked on this project. I asked whether your mom accepted of gay people because they're people, if she defended the non-sinfulness of me. She stood with gay folks, loved them, and she was never fully affirming, no. So funny thing is, I often wonder if she would be accepted in today, when we have such black and white thinking, when we go, oh, you've got to be 100% here, you can't question that. She grew up in a different time than we did. She believed in civil unions. I have obviously taken her message and gone a little bit further with that, obviously, and built on that. But much like I think of Paul the Apostle building on reaching Gentiles, things happen over time. And who knows where my mom would have been today? I don't know. She's been gone almost 16 years. But, binary thinking often, binary thinking and contradiction and getting stuck in those areas, rather than accepting, embracing those, often give us this hide the deeper meaning, the deeper truth that's there. And I think when you see someone like Elton John and Jake, two gay men writing these musicals and doing these things and celebrating my mother especially, and people like Jessica Chastain, I think you see they saw that a love that was beyond the contradictions that laid maybe within the belief system, or how one was raised to think or believe, or maybe the fear that one had of what the church community could do. That love spoke louder than doctrine. Anyhow, that's just my 2 cents. But it's there, really, it started to make sense. I'm like, God, this really makes sense why people celebrate the spirit of my mother. She really did love people. She really did survive, and she didn't allow herself to become bitter towards others. She didn't she didn't become angry at others. She didn't preach against others. She didn't, even if she carried a lot of anger and hurt towards Jerry Falwell, she eventually let that go as well. I remember when I was the one who told her that Falwell had died, she wept because she felt like, even though he didn't add, he tried to destroy us and pretty much turn my parents into dust, but she still felt like he played a key role in our life. And then she mourned him and thought it was very sad because there wasn't the reconciliation that she had hoped would eventually happen. And to me, that still speaks a lot because I still struggle with that type of grace and that type of forgiveness, even though she couldn't put it into words or put it into theology. She had it. She wasn't a philosopher, but she had something deeper. And that's what her spirit shines through. And I think that's why this play was so well done and almost like an abstract painting, is that it captured the spirit of her. It wasn't just a caricature of, here's Tammy Faye. And, it wasn't focused on the makeup and things like that. It was really focused on the spirit of this human being. And I think that's something that we could all hope for in our own lives, is that people understand that beyond our flesh, beyond our appearance, beyond our faults and things like that, our humanity, sometimes that there's something great. There's a spirit there that hopefully was something that continued to encourage people to live life well and feel loved and feel accepted, even when maybe the majority of people were saying you weren't. How beautiful is that? There is another scene that really moved me emotionally, and that's the scene when my dad is arrested, and it's kind of a slow scene. It's kind of off to the side, and he's having to take his ring off and take his watch off and take his shoes and remove his belt, and and then he's handcuffed and taken away, and it was just one of those really somber moments. And it follows into a few minutes later at another point where my mom and dad are visiting each other in prison. I won't go into too many details, but it was strange because the actor Andrew, as my dad was worn the khaki prison uniform that my father wore, and my mom, the woman playing my mom, they were both just there. And it felt so much at that moment that I wanted to just jump up on stage. I wanted to jump on stage because I wanted to hug my mom one more time, because I knew how painful those visits were for our family and how tough it was, and how it was just kind of this feeling like the end credits were about to roll. Like we couldn't go any lower because we hit rock bottom. We hit the rock, and I wanted to hold my mom one more time. And I wanted to ask my father, don't give up on me, and tell him that I loved him. It was quite a strong emotion. It was something that I'd never felt in a theater before. It was quite a personal experience that I'm sharing with you. And it's one of those things where it almost felt like I even felt almost like shame for having those feelings, or like ridiculous, like, oh, this is a play. I shouldn't be feeling this deeply. But then I said, I'm not going to shame myself. I'm going to be me. This is who I am, and this is what I'm feeling, and I'm going to feel that way, and that's okay. And I kind of hope, and what I really hope with a lot of you folks here, is that you allow yourself to feel things, even when it may seem foolish or overreactive, that you allow your feelings to go through. You don't have to allow your feelings to define you. You can allow those feelings to come in and move on. But at that point, that was what I needed to feel. And luckily, I knew that this was a big play, and that this was a giant play, and it was press night, and having the punk rock son of televangelist run on stage would not be something that people would like. It might be something that people talked about, but it would not help those folks who were bringing me out. But I allowed myself to feel. I allowed myself to cry, and it's funny because as I'm sitting next to like the Guardian reviewer, the critic, and he's very stoic, and he's not clapping, and he's not, when he can't clap, he can't show emotion, he doesn't do anything, and then like in the pitch dark, he writes in his little moleskin, and then sits there, and I'm crying, like, and he's just, and the producers, the man, and it was the producers, him and his wife. Every now and then I get a nice little pat. Are you doing okay? I'm like, I'm doing great. Thank you. It was kind of really cool to have that support. Um, the hardest part, I think, for me is though that my mother passes away in the play, and that's heavy, because I originally did not really mourn my mother very well, and I mourned her very little, and so that was really tough to go through that again. And there's a very heartfelt scene where she passes and is gone, and everything goes black, and I just was thinking to myself, and then I really started to bawl, and I couldn't find my handkerchief, and I was thinking, like, if this ends, I'm going to be crying for the next 4 hours, and I can't find my handkerchief. I'm looking underneath me. I'm looking all around, and I look next to me, and I just see the stoic guardian, and he's just kind of like, it's just like a proper British man struggling with emotions. It was kind of a really interesting moment, and a moment I'm grateful that I got to have. And then I just let myself go, and I just was like, all right, I got a jacket. I can, take my glasses off and dry my tears. Luckily, I wasn't wearing my leather jacket. I had another jacket on. I even feel strange. It's like, it feels almost like being naked, sharing these details with you. But this is a play, this is something that's open to the public. It's been sold out every night, and it's funny because when I go to the UK, because I go spend a lot of time in, I spend a lot of a lot of time in Belfast, and most people are like, "Who are your parents? What are Jim and Tammy?" I think I may have heard something about them. I remember one time she's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of them, but at least your dad's not the guy who sells those food buckets on TV." And I'm like, "Oh, actually, that is my dad." And she's like, "No, that's not your father. I know it's not." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's him." She's like, "No, because I remember what Jim Baker looked like, and that's not. This guy has a gray beard." And I'm going, "All right, that's my." To the point where she pulls up, gets on her phone, and she goes, "This is the guy I'm talking about." And I'm going, "Do you read the name underneath? That's my father." She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I'm like, "Hey, that's my dad. That's his thing. That's who he is, but yes, that's who I am." But most people don't, just didn't hear the news over there. So I think it's quite wild that there's this play introducing, this is their people's introduction to my parents and to my family. And I would say it's well done. There might be a thing or two that I would twist and change a little bit because I've defended my family my whole life, and but for the most part, it was really capturing the spirit of both of them. And I didn't think it didn't make my dad into a villain or things like that. Jerry Falwell's in it, so you can guess maybe who. Even Jerry Falwell, though, is in a way seen as a product of his time and a product of his religion. And I even felt like it kind of gave a graceful view of this person. And Jimmy Swaggart's in it, and a lot of televangelists in it, are in it. I said, you guys, if this comes to the States, you're going to have to fix this and this because we're a little bit off, but no one here is probably going to notice it. But yeah, so it was really wild. Billy Graham is in it. Steve Peters is in it. The famous Steve. You know, Jessica Aron's in it. That wasn't a fun part for me, but that's life and what part of the story. But yeah, so it was. So luckily, though, when my mom passes away and it goes dark, there was a very upbeat song. I couldn't recall which song it was, but it was good. She got to heaven. Good to know, just in case anybody was wondering. And so does Steve, but Steve's still alive in heaven, and he has a conversation with my mother. And I cried again because me and Steve have conversations about that type of thing, and about how much my mother has meant to him. And Steve is got stage 4 cancer right now and going through chemotherapy and all that, and struggling with himself. But he still says, he's still got my mother's cassettes that he listens to. So, like seeing this kaleidoscope of theater and then the reality of knowing what's going on and that he's still communicating with my mother, it was really another beautiful moment, and it really helped me not kind of pull myself together, and celebrate what I do have. It's like my father stopped speaking to me, and Steve came into my life, and that's who I send my pictures of my kids to, and we have conversations, and who seems to really love me, even though I'm quite a quiet person and that I'm not always the most communicative person in the world, still loves me, and it's really a wonderful relationship. And so it was really cool to have that with him. And the actor who plays Steve was a quite an amazing guy. Is an amazing guy. Now, there was a fictional part to the play, and this is where the talk really goes towards what we're doing in Revolution. And sometimes fiction tells us the greatest truths, though. Sometimes fiction tells us the truth more than reality. Just ask my friend Peter Rollins about his friend Seamus, and you will realize that there are many truths in his fiction, in the life of Seamus. It gets to the point where we always joke about, like, oh, it's another Seamus story. But in this, there's a secret religious group, and they run through the play, and this is part of a musical. This is part of the kaleidoscope of what's happening, and I was talking to one friend, and they're like, oh, I wasn't sure that was I liked that part. Somebody who's seen it said, oh, I wasn't sure that was my favorite part, and I was like, to me, that I really liked it. I liked this, what it added to the story, what it added to the spirit of my mother. I thought it was very beautiful. And so there's a secret religious group, and there's the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Pope, and then an evangelical leader, and I can't remember which the leader of the evangelical, the one I should probably know the best. I did not remember who that was. But there's three of them. And the scene and the set is all these squares. It's like just all these squares next to each other, and every now and then these squares will lift down, go down, and you'll see people. And so there's this talk, and there's the Pope is here, the Archbishop is here, the evangelical pastor is here, and then there's like this space in the middle. And the reason behind their secret group is that they're watching for those who will usher in Christ's return. So they're always talking about, is this the moment we've been waiting for? Is this happening? And so their idea is the electric church, is Christian television basically, is this what we've been waiting for? And they're keeping a watch on it to see if this is maybe what brings the revival and brings Christ's return. But of course, then all the scandals happen. My parents fall. Their marriage falls apart. The scandal happens. Dad goes to prison. Jimmy Swaggart has his thing. Pat Robertson has another scandal. Everybody, all these major evangelicals and televangelists start to have scandal after scandal after scandal. And so they're talking about basically that, well, I guess it wasn't the electric church that was the answer. I'm sure now it's probably podcasts, or that will be the answer. YouTube channels. Jokingly wink. So they're talking about all these scandals that are happening. And, this obviously isn't the one. This isn't the chosen one. And then one of the guys says, but what about Tammy Faye? What about happened to Tammy Faye? And the visual is my mother in a trench coat, and her hair's messed up, and this is the actress, and her makeup's messed, and she's just kind of a mess. And she's just walking backwards, and she walks, and so you have the Pope up here, and the Archbishop here, and the evangelical leader here, and they're talking about her, and she's just broken. She's really broken. And to me, it was just the visual was so powerful, because I'm sure they planned it this way because it kind of looks like a cross. And, here you have this humiliated, tired Tammy Faye, mom. And the question kind of turns to the suggestive idea is the church is asking, these secret church leaders are asking is basically, is there a chance that we maybe have destroyed another prophet, that we missed it? And we got so caught up in all the mess that we missed another one. It was almost very Christ-like, of this moment of being completely ridiculed and disgraced. And did we miss another one? And why that was beautiful to me is I've been studying, getting ready for the beginning of next year, some new stuff on Paul and Galatians and things like that. And what that moment reminded me of, and what we often neglect because we want to look at, we always talk about, oh, the resurrection, he's risen. But the crucifixion, it was a reminder of that Jesus was disgraced on the cross, like to hang on that cross, to be seen as a common criminal, would be bring shame upon this person's life, bring disgrace upon them. And that if this is the Son of God, if this is God in the flesh, then you have the humiliated God on the cross. And I was thinking about that. And, why was Paul so fervently persecuting Christians and persecuting Christianity? Is because one of the things that Paul was passionate about was that why would you follow this disgraced wannabe Messiah, this loss, this mess, this failure? Why would you allow this failure to be someone that you would follow? And because Paul felt righteous, he felt like this is no way that this could be the Messiah. And then later, Paul would be called to reach to those ones who also were considered disgraced. So Paul, when he has his conversion, focusing on this disgraced Savior, goes, well, in my tradition, the Gentiles were also a disgrace just for being born. And these are who I'm going to reach. These are the people I'm going to love. And kind of lines up that whole moment of how powerful the loss of God, the humiliation of God really plays in to the work of Paul and to the work of Christianity. And even through the resurrection, and I talked about this last week, the resurrection continues to point back to the crucifixion, to that moment where Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Something that I think a lot of us have felt in our lives, and even may feel right now, and I feel a lot, and like I said, just recently have I started to feel this presence of something that is haunting me, that is beyond existence, something that was passed on to me by my mother through philosophy and through my mother's life, and I'm grateful to have that. And my goal is to pass that on, to pass on the haunting now that it's Halloween, to pass on the ghosts, and the spirit of something that's greater than ourselves, that which accepts us, the spirit of grace, the spirit of redemption, the spirit of hope, the spirit that does not allow us to be divided because we have different opinions, the spirit that says grace and forgiveness is what it's about, so you need to learn to argue well and not be afraid of conflict. Step within to conflict. Don't go to war. Do not destroy each other. Do not kill each other. Do not be consumed by one another. Live life that might be a little bit difficult. You may have to take up your own cross. You may have to walk into your own humiliation or the humiliation of others in order to show them love and grace, but never give up on one another. That's what this love is saying. And this is what people are seeing. These are putting these films and these documentaries and things have been put together by people who don't have anything. A lot of them don't have anything to do with the church or have a past in the church and aren't Christians and don't confess Jesus. But they're saying there's something about this love that I'm seeing. And what I feel really lucky and blessed to have is to have a mother who grasped what that love meant, knew that love was greater than all the theology and all the doctrine and all the philosophy in the world, that love was greater, that grace was greater than all that. And I am beyond, living under the shadow. That's a big shadow my parents cast. But that's okay, because the gifts that I've taken with me is to show love and love radically. And often that shadow has gotten me through the door, has allowed me to write books, has allowed me to do work like this. And it feels divine in a way. So it was quite a powerful week, and to end it with seeing Nick Cave and hearing what he had to say about other people who've been humiliated in the media and things like that, and to hear his words, coming out of what his brokenness that he's survived was really beautiful. And seeing Steve, and it was just also just healing. And and it, something kind of silly happened on the way there is that when I was getting on the airplane in London, they said boarding all people now, and so everybody started running for it. But I guess they've been the speaker was down and they've been making announcements vocally, and we didn't hear the saying that it was only certain groups were allowed. And I ended up having an argument that went too far with someone who worked there. I won't go into the details, but it was kind of humiliating, and I had to go sit in a chair, and I was told I wasn't going to fly and all this kind of stuff. And I really didn't lose my temper. It was just a misunderstanding. But it was really humiliating, and I felt like, oh gosh, this is I even had to call Jake and be like, I don't know if I'm going to fly home today. I questioned this sign, the electric sign that they had put up, and asked them if they could change it or take it down, and they got really angry with me. So I get on the airplane, and I'm just frazzled, just completely frazzled, just trying to get my stuff together, and like, I just got to get home, you know, this is going to pass. And then over the loudspeaker, the captain's like, yeah, sorry, sometimes we get unruly passengers, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God. I'm just like so humiliated. And so the lady next to me starts talking to me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm really embarrassed because I think they're talking about me. And I said it was really just a big misunderstanding. I was trying to be helpful, and it was not very helpful, I guess. And so she starts asking me all these questions. I'm like, are you a therapist? She goes, no. I said, well, what are you doing? You're here in London? She goes, no, I've just come from Israel, and I'm with a church group. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what denomination are you with? And, you know, are you with a denomination? Because she asked me, but I didn't. I said, well, that's a hard question to answer. She goes, oh, are you with a I'm like, no, I don't follow denomination. I kind of feel like my theology and scholarship grows so much over time, I can't really subscribe to one group. And she said, oh, I understand. She goes, well, I'm Southern Baptist. So I was like, oh. And what probably should have been a moment, and she goes, but I'm not like the Falwell Southern Baptist, but I'm still Southern Baptist. And I was like, oh, this should be interesting. And we just had a really great conversation. And we talked about what she was doing. She asked me about my life and asked me about the play. And we just had this great conversation for about the first 30 minutes of just, they ended up not having enough baggage people, so we got delayed even longer for the plane to be loaded up with baggage. And we just kind of had this conversation, and it was really a nice moment. And I'm saying this as a person who I don't believe like predestination, and I really struggle with believing in miracles and things like that. But I will say, like the Nick Cave thing, and then sitting next to this Southern Baptist woman who I thought definitely would have thought I was a heretic, showing me this love and this grace and compassion. It was just like my mother's spirit just kind of just moved through the whole week. And it was really beautiful. It was a really beautiful moment. And I'll end with this. I think it's in Corinthians where it says, what the world considers foolish will shame the wise. And I thought about like how many people thought my mom was foolish. And I remember Jerry Falwell saying that the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top in my mom's brain. And people always give me the face of Tammy Faye, you know, the mascara, the makeup, and all this. But it's like what the world considers foolish will shame the wise. And I'm thinking now how people are celebrating her life and seeing her as a beacon of hope and a beacon of like true Christianity, and how really amazing that is. And so that, I guess this is, you know, is this a review of a play or an experience? Is this a sermon? I think this is just for me today is a testimony of the past week of something that really great happened, and that I hope will encourage all of you as this is that sometimes these disasters in our lives that seem to be the end and that there seem to be no hope, and when even the right and the left cancel your life and your family and your parents, and you carry a last name, and your dad believes in the world's going to end in a certain way and is selling food buckets and stops talking to you, and your mom is gone, and all these things happen, there is still hope finds a way. Hold on. Don't give up. You know, my mom always used to sing the song, don't give up, you're on the brink of a miracle, you know. And so it's that kind of thing of like, I felt alive. And it's funny, I was sitting there and I had my jacket on in the airplane, and I have this button, and if you can see, it says, I am a me, but what it really says, I'm a mess. And I have like 10 of these buttons. People always, oh, cause I take them off and give them to people because they're like, I feel like a mess too. But something happened on the plane where I just said, you know, even if I'm a mess, I'm still me. And I took out a magic marker and crossed out the two S's. So that's, what a weird week. What a great week. What a fascinating week, you know. And some of you probably think, did he talk to Elton John? I did get a chance to chat with him FaceTime. But I'm going to keep that personal because that was a personal moment and it was a really lovely moment. So I'm hoping that this helps you not want to give up, like my mom never gave up, to go through that thing and show obviously that I have realized that I've got to keep going and moving forward and can even find hope in my tragedy and in my pain and a lot of my hurt that drove my life for a long time to see a type of redemption happen in a way that I never thought possible. And I don't feel like a very lucky person, to be honest with you. My life, especially the past 15 years, has been kind of tough. So I hope you can accept yourself as part of today's talk. Maybe we're not talking about other people right now. We're talking to you. Accept yourself. Put your hand on the television screen. Because I'm working on that myself. And my mom had this book that said, I gotta be me. And I feel like that play captured that idea is I gotta be me. And I realized I gotta be me. I gotta stop trying. I can't be other people. I can't be Brennan Manning. I can't be Rob Bell. I'm not Henry Rollins. I'm not Pete Rollins. I'm me. I'm not Tammy Faye. I'm not Jim Baker. I just got to be me. And I hope that you can understand that you've got to be you. I remember one time I read in this book, and it was an emergent book of all places. I was really surprised. It said, like, it wasn't godly for Tammy Faye to write a book saying, I got to be me. That's selfish. You've got to die to yourself. And I think only when we die to certain things of our life and ourselves do we realize who we truly are and that we are us and that we are called to be us as individuals and interesting and that we all are just created out of the same old junk and God doesn't make any junk, as my mom also used to say. And we're all going to have ups and downs. But there may just be hope for us in the long run, even after, my mom passed and didn't get to see any of this. And I think she really would have been touched by it. But something happens there, So don't think like, I think about like the artist who cut his ear off, who never saw that people loved his paintings, Or my mom never got to see this part of her life celebrated. She got to see some of it, which is really lovely, but she never got to see how far it really went, But there's a grace there, and there's a hope there, and there's a hope built in for us to see that even at the end, it's not the end of our story. So whether you believe in an afterlife or not, I always say, do you believe in life after death? I believe in life before death, but death is not even the end of our stories. And so love well, accept yourself, help yourself accept yourself so you can accept others. And so you can argue well with others and show love. So after you're gone, that love that is eternal continues to grow and continues to move forward. I mean, if you had told me like my mom, my silly, funny, crazy mom who loved to go to movies and go shopping and do all these other things in life and all these other distractions in life would be held for being a true Christian to the world, who would have thought it? But it happened. So there's some good news today. I don't think you're probably used to seeing me smile like this or be happy about something, but it's good news. So there's some good news for you folks. It's not all dreary. I usually say, oh, we don't play no happy songs here at Revolution, but today I guess is a happy song. So thank you for that. And just the business of the church and Revolution and all that, or the gathering, sorry. Hey, if you like what we're doing, you like what's happening, we have not brought much income in this month at all. And we are really, 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 if it wasn't for another job, I would not be paying my bills and being able to take care of my children. And so I would really be blessed and excited if you guys could make donations to Revolution Church. It's almost the end of the year. It helps us pay for the sites. It helps us pay for our financial guy who makes sure that all the finances and everything are in order, as well as it pays me a salary. and hopefully will eventually help us do other things and get Josh on staff and things like that. But right now we're not doing that, and so I have to ask, if you like what you're seeing, please help. If not, this might not be here as often. We'll try to keep it there in some way, but we do need your support. And you can just do that by going to revolutionchurch.com and pushing support. And as always, if you could just tell people about the YouTube channel, tell people about the Instagrams, tell people about the Twitter, retweet, put the talks on the Instagram stories, and spread the word. That also really helps us a lot to get out there and do this work. So thank you so much. Thank you all. I'm really glad that you got to be the first people I shared this with. I have not shared this with anyone else. I mean, a couple individuals, but I just thought, should I do a separate video about it? And then I thought, no, I'm going to do it to the gathering because this is part of what the gathering is. And I've got to be me, and that's who I am, and that's where we are today. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Happy Halloween. Have fun. Be safe out there. And yeah, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.